He knew he had been left behind the moment the sky blinked without him. It wasn't a poetic realization. It was annoyingly practical. 1 second the evacuation ship was there, loud, bright, reassuringly full of people who preferred living, and the next, it simply was. Not vanished in a dramatic explosion, not swallowed by a vortex, just edited out. Like someone had decided the scene worked better without it. "Great," he muttered, or thought he did. The sound reached his ears half a second late, slightly offended at the delay. The ground beneath him pulsed once, as if acknowledging his complaint. He didn't appreciate the feedback. He tried to sit up. His body disagreed. Several parts of him, in fact, held a quiet but firm meeting and voted against the idea. He remained where he was, staring at a sky that couldn't decide on a color. It shifted between shades too quickly to name, like a painter panicking halfway through. "All right," he whispered again, testing whether time would allow it this round. It did, generous. The horizon folded, not metaphorically. A distant ridge bent inward like soft fabric, paused, then unfolded itself as if nothing had happened. He blinked at it, which felt like the appropriate scientific response. "I'm dying," he concluded, because that seemed simpler than everything else. His shadow disagreed. It stretched to the left while the light source very clearly sat above him, then snapped back into place as though caught misbehaving. He stared at it. "Pick a direction," he said. "We're not improvising this." No answer. Unprofessional. He tried to remember the last few minutes before the ship disappeared. There had been alarms, too many, overlapping like enthusiastic musicians who had never rehearsed together. Someone had shouted coordinates. Someone else had shouted something less helpful but more emotional. Then the world had tilted, and now here he was, lying on a planet that seemed deeply uninterested in consistency. A small rock beside him rose gently into the air. He watched it float upward, hesitate, then drift back down, landing exactly where it had been. It did this twice more, as if testing gravity like a cautious swimmer dipping a toe into cold water. "Don't encourage it," he warned the rock. The rock ignored him. Typical. A faint sensation crept into his mind, not a voice, not a sound, but something like the feeling of remembering a word that hadn't been spoken yet. It hovered there, patient, waiting for him to notice it properly. "I'm not in the mood," he said, closing his eyes. "Whatever this is, come back later, preferably when I'm less dying." The sensation remained. He opened one eye. The sky had reversed slightly, clouds sliding backward into formations they had already abandoned. For a brief moment, everything aligned. Light, shadow, the slow hum beneath the ground, and he felt it again, clearer this time. Not a presence exactly, more like being read, carefully, thoroughly, with a level of attention that felt almost polite. "That's unsettling," he said. The sensation paused as if considering his feedback. "Look," he added, shifting his head just enough to regret it immediately. "If you're here to help, now would be excellent. If you're here to watch, at least pretend you're doing something useful." The ground pulsed again, softer this time. Something brushed against his thoughts, not entering, not forcing, just touching the edges like a curious hand hovering over water. And then, without warning, he remembered standing in a place he had never been. Tall structures stretched into a dim, unfamiliar sky. Figures moved in silence, their forms indistinct but purposeful. He knew, without knowing how, that they were building something enormous, something that would never be finished. The memory ended as abruptly as it began. He blinked, breath-catching. "Okay," he said slowly, "that's new." The sensation returned, quieter now, almost patient. He let out a weak laugh, which arrived on time for once. "If this is how I go," he murmured, "I was really hoping for something less interactive." The sky flickered, and somewhere within his fading thoughts, something continued to read. The next memory didn't wait for permission. It slipped in like it had always belonged there, rearranging his thoughts with the confidence of a long-term tenant. One moment he was staring at the unreliable sky, and the next he was standing upright, perfectly healthy, which felt suspicious, on a wide metallic surface that stretched far beyond the horizon. "No," he said immediately. "I refuse to be this okay. This is clearly a trap." No one responded, which somehow made it worse. He looked down at his hands, clean. No blood, no shaking, no pain. He flexed his fingers cautiously as if expecting them to argue. They didn't, extremely uncooperative of them. "All right," he muttered. "Either I'm dead, hallucinating, or I've been upgraded. Statistically, I don't like any of these." The ground beneath him vibrated with a deep, rhythmic pulse. Not mechanical, not natural. Something in between, like a heartbeat that had studied engineering and decided to improvise. He turned slowly. Figures moved in the distance. Tall, indistinct, their outlines shifting just slightly out of sync with themselves. They walked with purpose, building something massive, structures rising in elegant curves that seemed to anticipate their own collapse. He watched one section fold inward, vanish, then reappear in a slightly different configuration. "Ah," he said, nodding once. "So we're doing temporary architecture now. Bold choice." One of the figures paused. It didn't turn. It didn't react. It simply stopped existing for a fraction of a second, then resumed as if nothing had happened. He blinked. "Right, I'm not important here." The thought should have bothered him more, but instead it felt expected. Something brushed against his awareness again, that same careful presence, like fingers turning pages inside his mind. He stiffened. "Hey, I noticed that." The world didn't change, but his perspective did. The figures grew clearer, not in shape, but in intention. He understood them without knowing how. They were building a system, a structure designed to hold something. Memory, maybe, or time. Possibly both, which felt unnecessarily ambitious. "Look," he said aloud, pacing a few steps before realizing he wasn't tired. "If this is your idea of showing me something important, I'd appreciate a summary. Preferably with bullet points." The pulse beneath him deepened. And suddenly everything overlapped. The same place, different versions. The structures unfinished, then complete, then shattered. The figures numerous, then gone, then never there at all. He staggered slightly as multiple outcomes tried to exist at once inside his head. "Oh, that's not fair," he groaned. "You can't just stack realities like that. There are rules, probably." A flicker at the edge of his vision pulled his attention. Someone was standing closer now, not one of the shifting figures. This one was different, still. He squinted. She didn't approach. She didn't move at all, but somehow she felt closer with every second. Her form resisted certainty, edges soft, like they hadn't fully decided where to be. Light passed through her in faint patterns, as though something distant was shining from within. He straightened instinctively, then winced at the unfamiliar lack of pain. "You're new," he said, "or I'm finally noticing you. Either way, congratulations." She tilted her head slightly. It wasn't a dramatic motion. It was small, precise, and somehow carried the weight of a question he didn't understand. "Yeah, I don't get it either," he admitted. Something shifted, not in the world but in him. He felt her not touching, not entering, just aligning briefly with his perception. And in that instant he knew something impossible. She didn't belong to this place. Or rather, she had. Once. In a version that no longer existed. "That's unfortunate," he said quietly. "I'm starting to see a pattern here, and it's not encouraging." Her gaze held him, if it was a gaze at all. It felt like being observed from multiple moments at once, like she had already seen him make decisions he hadn't reached yet. "Do I get a say in any of this?" he asked. Silence. The structures in the distance began to collapse again, folding into themselves with quiet inevitability. The figures continued their work as if destruction was just another step in the process. He let out a slow breath. "Of course I don't." The presence in his mind grew clearer now, not louder, not stronger, just closer, patient, interested. He rubbed his face, which still felt annoyingly intact. "All right," he said. "You're showing me things. I'm reacting to them. Classic interaction. But I'd like to point out, this is a terrible time for a tour." The pulse beneath him softened. The woman didn't move. But for a brief, unsettling moment he felt something from her. Not emotion. Not exactly. Recognition. And then the world slipped again. The metal surface vanished. The figures dissolved, and he was falling back into his broken body, the weight of it crashing down like an overdue reality check. He gasped, this time late. "Okay," he coughed, staring at the fractured sky. That one definitely happened." The rock beside him lifted slightly off the ground again, hovering with quiet confidence. He turned his head toward it. "You saw that too, right?" The rock remained unhelpfully silent. Somewhere inside his thoughts, something continued to watch. And this time it wasn't just observing. It was learning. He came back wrong. Not physically. His body still hurt in all the reliable places. But something behind his thoughts had shifted, like furniture rearranged in a room he didn't remember inviting anyone into. He blinked at the sky. It blinked back a second later, which he decided was a deeply unhealthy development. "Okay," he said slowly, "we're copying each other now. That's fine. That's normal. That's not normal." The rock beside him hovered again, this time with more confidence, as if it had been practicing while he was busy losing his sense of reality. It rotated slightly, showing off. "Don't get ambitious," he warned it. "You're still a rock. Let's not let this go to your head." Something in his mind disagreed. Not loudly, not forcefully, just present. He felt it again, that careful, deliberate awareness, no longer just observing but adjusting, testing. Like it had taken notes during their last interaction and was now applying improvements. "Oh, you're learning," he muttered. "That's comforting. Nothing has ever gone wrong when an unknown entity starts learning from a dying human." A flicker. Not outside, inside. For a brief moment he wasn't alone in his own thoughts. He stood again without standing somewhere vast. Not the metallic world from before. This place felt older, quieter. Like something that had outlived its purpose and simply decided to remain. Structures stretched endlessly, but they weren't being built anymore. They were stored, layers upon layers, stacked not in space but in meaning. He could feel them pressing against his awareness, countless impressions waiting to be understood. "No," he said, shaking his head even though he wasn't sure he had one here. "Absolutely not. I just got back from the last one. There should be a break. A transition period, maybe a snack." The presence didn't react to the joke. Rude. Something moved within the layers, not a figure, not a shape, more like a memory choosing to become visible. He saw a world ending. Not dramatically, not with explosions or fire. It simply slowed. Motion reduced, sound faded, and everything gently came to a stop, like a story losing interest in continuing. He felt the final thoughts of whatever had lived there, not fear, not panic, just a quiet awareness of completion. Then it was gone, replaced by another, and another. "Okay, that's too many endings," he said quickly. "I'm already working through one. I don't need a collection." The layers shifted again, responding this time, not with emotion but with adjustment. The vision slowed, spaced out as if accommodating him. "Oh," he blinked. "You listened." That's new. A familiar presence emerged at the edge of it all. She didn't appear suddenly. She resolved, like a signal coming into focus. He turned toward her instinctively. "You again," he said. "I'm starting to think you're part of the customer service department." She tilted her head slightly, the same precise motion as before. Closer now, clearer. He noticed something different. She wasn't changing as much. The instability around her still existed, but it bent less, hesitated less, as if whatever was happening to him was stabilizing her. "That seems backwards," he muttered. "I'm the one falling apart." The presence within him shifted at that thought. Not disagreement, correction. He felt it then, truly felt it. This wasn't just observation. It wasn't just showing him things. It was integrating, carefully, deliberately, piece by piece. Each ending he experienced didn't vanish, it stayed, layered within him, organized, preserved. He froze. "No." The word came out sharper than expected. "No, no, no, that's not what we're doing," he said quickly, as if clarity alone could stop it. "You don't get to turn me into storage. I'm not built for that. I forget where I put things on a daily basis." The presence paused, not retreating, not stopping, just considering. She stepped closer, not physically but in awareness. The distance between them collapsed in a way that made his thoughts stumble. He could feel her now, not as an external figure but as something partially aligned with him. And for a moment, something passed between them. Not words, understanding. She had been here, not as she was now, as part of this, a fragment, a preserved ending. "You didn't survive," he said quietly, not a question. Her gaze held him. There was no sadness in it, only continuation. He exhaled slowly. "That's worse." The layers around him shifted again, but this time they felt anchored, connected to him in a way that was becoming harder to ignore. The presence moved closer, not around him, through him, careful, precise, patient. He felt something settle into place within his thoughts, then another. "You're serious," he whispered. The realization landed with uncomfortable weight. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't a hallucination. This was a process. He swallowed, or at least simulated the action. "You're building something," he said. "Not out there, in here." The response wasn't a voice. It was a certainty. He laughed weakly. "Of course you are. Why wouldn't you be?" She stood before him, more stable than ever now, her presence no longer flickering at the edges. He pointed vaguely at himself. "And I'm, what? The container, the archive, the very unfortunate volunteer." The presence didn't deny it. It didn't confirm it either. It simply continued. Another layer settled, another ending stored. He closed his eyes, which didn't help. "This is a terrible plan," he muttered. "I'm not organized enough for eternity." But something deep inside his thoughts had already begun to disagree. And worse. It was starting to feel right. He expected the end to feel louder. Instead, it arrived quietly, like something finally finding its proper place. He lay there, breathing unevenly, watching the sky hesitate between moments again, but this time he noticed something different. It wasn't chaos anymore. It was pattern, subtle, complex, but consistent, like a language he had accidentally learned without realizing it. "All right," he murmured, voice dragging slightly behind his lips before catching up. "I think I'm starting to get it." Which is concerning. I don't usually understand things this important. The rock beside him hovered, then settled, then hovered again, as if waiting for instructions. He glanced at it. "Don't look at me. I just got promoted to something I didn't apply for." Inside him, everything was no longer separate. The endings he had seen, the worlds that had slowed into silence, the voices that had faded at the edge of existence, they weren't pressing against him anymore. They were arranged, balanced, held together in a structure that felt strangely natural, as if his mind had expanded just enough to carry them without breaking. "Well," he exhaled softly, "this is new. I'm not panicking." "That feels suspicious." The presence was no longer outside him. It didn't need to be. It existed through him now, not controlling, not overwhelming, but present in a way that felt less like invasion and more like alignment. Like two things finally agreeing on how to exist. "You could have explained this earlier," he said. "Saved me a lot of dramatic reactions." No answer, but he felt something close to amusement. "Wow," he blinked. "You do have a sense of humor. It's terrible, but it's there." A flicker passed through his thoughts, not a memory, a choice. He saw it clearly, himself refusing, pushing back, breaking the connection. The layers collapsing, the preserved worlds dissolving into nothing, erased not by violence but by absence. Then another version, himself accepting fully, letting go, becoming something that no longer needed a name, carrying everything forward without question. He stared at both possibilities. "You're really not big on simple decisions, are you?" he muttered. The woman appeared again, not distant, not unstable. She stood within his awareness as something whole, her form no longer flickering between possibilities. The light beneath her skin moved slowly now, like a steady current rather than a scattered storm. He looked at her, quieter this time. "You're not stuck anymore." Not a question. She tilted her head slightly, but there was no uncertainty in it now. He felt it clearly. She wasn't waiting. She had already become part of this. "Right," he nodded once. "So that's where this goes." He closed his eyes briefly. then opened them again to the fractured sky. I spent my whole life trying not to mess things up, he said, and somehow I ended up responsible for everything that already did. The rock floated again, then gently lowered itself as if agreeing. He let out a weak laugh. Even the rock gets it. That's not a great sign for me. The presence shifted, not urging, not demanding, just ready. He took a slow breath, feeling the weight of countless endings settle into something steady inside him. Not heavy, not overwhelming, complete. All right, he said finally. We'll do it your way, but I'm setting one condition. Silence. He smiled faintly. We keep the jokes. If I'm going to be an eternal archive of lost civilizations, I refuse to be a boring one. For the first time, something changed in response. Not in the world, in him. A subtle adjustment, like space being made for something small but important. I'll take that as a yes, he said. The sky above him flickered one last time. Then it stopped. Not frozen. Stable. Time moved forward, clean, uninterrupted, no longer hesitating. His body exhaled slowly, the pain fading not because it healed but because it no longer needed to hold him. He felt himself slipping, not downward, not away, outward, expanding into the structure he now understood, carrying every ending, every voice, every forgotten world, not as a burden but as a continuation. He glanced once more at where the rock had been. Take care of the place, he murmured. The ground pulsed softly, and then he was no longer just one life reaching its end. He was all of them, held together in a quiet, endless moment that would never be lost again. Somewhere within that vastness, he let out one last thought. Not bad, he admitted. Until we meet again in another story, we're improving ourselves with your feedback. See you.